I thought I heard somebody out here. I'm glad you stopped by. This will give us a chance, or me a chance, to answer some of your questions about the teepee tent, which I've been using for years now, and also how the truck camper topper is set up. So, but before we do that, I've got to make some breakfast. I was watching a YouTube video. I believe the channel is called Northwest Fishing Secrets or something like that. I'll just put the name down here on the bottom of the screen. You want to check it out. Anyway, he always, often does a cook and catch. I often do a no-catch cook, but one thing he did that I really like to see was the way he did his tortillas to make his tacos. So check this out. Let's hope I can make it work. The first thing we're doing is heating up the pan. I like to use cast iron. I don't know why, but it just seems sort of campy. And it's easier for me to clean up because all I do is wipe out the stuff, and that's good. Anyway, once we're going to get this thing heated up, we'll move on. Okay, now what I'm going to do is take a little bit of my cheese and just put it right in the pan. Then I'm going to put my tortilla right on top of that cheese. Then I'm going to take it off. The cheese is melted right on it, and most of it doesn't stick, but that crunchy stuff is really good. Now I'm going to go ahead and cook up some pepperoni and eggs, and I'll have it done. Would have been nice to have some tomatoes or mushrooms or whatever to throw in there, but I don't have it, so this will do. Looking good. That's good. That cheese, sort of crunchy. I'll be doing this again. Well, lots of you have been interested in the Ozark Trail Teepee tent, the $49.95 Wonder. Well, it's a good little tent. It's spacious, and I've certainly enjoyed it now for over 2 years. And I know a lot of you have too, or at least I've had 50,000 views on that particular video. So I've mentioned it in many others, and there's been some revisits and updates and that type of thing. But I'm going to just go real quickly, bring you inside again to show you what we've done. And Jorah wants to say hello too. The tent really has quite a bit of room in it. I think it's from the one end to the other, the corners, six-sided. There's, I think it's 11 feet. Obviously, you can't get all the way to the wall when you're using a tent, or a cot, I mean, like I've done here. But if you're not using a cot, if you're just on the floor, it really makes it lots of room here anyway. I usually have a chair down over on this end. I've taken it out, put it by the fire ring. And then Jorah has his little chair. And right now he's in his little crate. He loves it. He feels secure in there. But he hasn't eaten his breakfast yet. So you better get on it, Jorah. We do use a Mr. Buddy heater. If it's cold, I put it in here yesterday. Last night, I got up about 2:30 or so and did use it very quickly. It warmed it up very quickly. So it's not absolutely necessary in this kind of weather. It's supposed to be close to 80 today here in the desert. I have the topper, the truck backed right up pretty much to the tent. We're about, probably 12 feet away. And I've got the kitchen all opened up, and this is how I use it. As you can see, the stove is on a table, a folding table, that I simply slide in into the topper, as well as the kitchen box is also folds up. I put it on its edge and it slides in next to the bed. I don't have everything set up inside simply because we're not using it inside this trip. But as I think I've shown before, I do have a bed made up in there and some chairs, power supply, all the fishing gear, etc. But the way I have this set up now, it's sort of a U shape, so that I can have my prep side on one, or prep on one side, and then over here have the kitchen or the stove, pots, pans, etc. It's real convenient. If the weather was cold or rainy or super hot, I have an awning that I can stick up off the back. I'm not going to do that now. I do want to show you a new mod I've made to this, and it is a rod that sticks out so I can hang a lantern. I'll show you how that works. Well, I have a rod, a piece of conduit, attached to the cross members of my rack on top of the truck, or on the topper, and it holds or secures my axe and shovel, and it's a hollow piece of conduit, and in that conduit I have another piece of conduit. I have it secured with a little bungee so that I don't lose it. And all you need to do is slide it out. To whatever distance I want it, and then attach my lantern to it. I'll show you how that works in the dark when it gets dark. Well, our day is growing to a close here in the shadow of the Superstition Mountains. Jorah and I are just chilling. Gonna have a little bit of a fire before we go in for the evening. I've spent a lot of time backpacking and hiking in this area, and there's lots of history, and it's pretty interesting. History and legend. And some of you have asked me about things like the Lost Dutchman Mine, or even the Lost Dutchman himself, Jacob Waltz, the old, actually Dutch prospector who made his name here in the late 1700s. But the story goes back way before then, back into the 16th century, the late 1500s. And if we want to sit back and take a little bit of time this evening, I'll tell you what I know about that. I'm not an expert, just curious, just a reader. But maybe you'll find it interesting. Let me know what you think. Please leave a comment below. Meanwhile, I'm going to just enjoy the fire and tell you what I know. As we discuss this history, it's important to remember that it was just recent, well, as far as history is concerned, recent, about 100 years ago that Arizona became a state. And before that, it was Mexico. And before that, it was actually Spain. It was in the early 1600s, late 1500s, that this area was controlled by Spain. And by area, I'm referring to what is now present-day Santa Fe, down to Tucson, or even further northwest. So it's a very large area that we're talking about. This area was controlled out of the Pueblo of Santa Fe by the Jesuit priests. That at that time, that was the capital of the Spanish province called New Mexico. Many of these priests educated and converted the native Pimas and Maricopa natives living in the area. At first, they were friendly toward the natives, but later they became rather abusive and then used them as forced labor. Much of that forced labor was used to actually work the silver and gold mines that many of the priests had sort of like a side gig that they were running. Toward the end of the 1700s, a lot of the Jesuits were expelled by Spain, and they were doing that. They were expelled probably because of their side gig of the mining of the silver and the gold, and the fact that they were not turning it over to Spain, but they were hoarding it for themselves to create their own personal riches. This hoarding of gold and silver is important because it sort of fuels the thought of some of the theories about the Lost Dutchman Mine that we can talk about as we go on. Finally, around, well, actually it was 1821, as I recall, that Mexico gained its independence from Spain. And then all of what is now Arizona and New Mexico became Mexican territory rather than the Spanish territory. Mexico didn't keep this new territory for long because in, I believe it was 1846, Mexico and the United States had a full-scale war, and when it was all over, United States won, and Arizona and New Mexico at that point became possessions of the United States. This is an important point in time in our history. That's very important in the story of the Lost Dutchman gold mine and the discovery of gold in the Superstition area. Remember, we're talking a very large area, not just the Superstition Wilderness area, which is much smaller, but of course is included in what we're talking about today. In any event, many of the Mexicans did have mines and were doing mining in this area and were worried about what would become of their mines now that the United States had taken over the country. Included in this group of prominent Spanish families was the Peralta family, who had large mines in the Sonora, Mexico area and wanted to expand. And in doing so, now they were threatened because they would be expanding into the United States. Well, this gives us a little bit of the background to this story of the Lost Dutchman Mine and the old Lost Dutchman himself. So we'll continue on. I think this is a good place to stop. We don't want to talk too long over this fire, so we'll continue next time if you wish. Well, we're all loaded up, ready to go. I hope you enjoyed this trip, and let me know in the comments below, or send me an email if you'd like. The information about my email address is right here also. But let me know if you want to hear more about the Superstitions, and thanks for joining us, and be sure to join us for the next one.